Today, my guest is Bill Kearney, who's a candidate for District 5 Supervisor. Bill, thank you very much for coming in and being my guest today in the studio. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, let's start with some basic information about you. How old are you, first of all?
77.
And how long have you lived in Lake County?
39 years.
And how long in District 5?
39 years.
Okay. And you're a registered Republican?
Yes, I am.
How long have you been a registered Republican?
All my life. My parents grew up in Iowa. My parents were Republican. And
Okay. Are you endorsed by the Republican Party of Lake County?
I have not even spoken to them. I'm not running as a Republican or a Democrat.
Okay. Are you involved in the Republican Party of Lake County?
No, I'm not on a committee or anything like that.
Okay.
We had a group years ago called the Elephants that was broken up.
Yeah, I think I read that you're somewhere that your opponent, one of your opponents, Ahajanian, is secretary for the Republicans. I think, is that true?
You know, I don't know him.
Okay.
I've never met him. I can barely pronounce his name, and I'm never sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly.
Okay. Well, why don't you tell us a little about yourself, just in a minute or two, your educational background, your employment history, that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, I was born in southern Iowa, outside of Des Moines, in a farm community, and raised on a farm till I went to college and started out in ag journalism and actually switched over to pharmacy and became a registered pharmacist. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science from Drake University in 1966. Went to work to Walgreens to avoid being drafted. I was older at the time. I was 24, 25, and they were going to keep people out of the draft because there was a shortage of pharmacists. It didn't quite work that way. Less than a year later, I was drafted, and I spent some time in Columbia, South Carolina, and I taught school in Houston for combat medics, and ended up going to Vietnam for just a brief time, and then finishing my career in Korea. The code that I worked under was 91Q20, which was a pharmacist, and there were probably 200 of us that worked in the hospital, a 1,000-bed hospital in South Carolina. And then by the time I got up to the DMZ in Korea, there was one pharmacist. We were in a MASH unit, Mobile Army Hospital, that moved around through the mountains because we were right on the demilitarized zone. So I came back from there and had a little adjusting to do, and went back to Chicago to work, and then I eventually came to Denver, and then Salt Lake City, and then California. I had licenses in 5 different states, and managed the whole store, not just the pharmacy. So in 1980, I got tired of switching stores every 3 years, because that's what they did to managers, and had an opportunity to come to a place called Lakeport, which I had no idea where it was or what it was, and all I heard was there were boat races there, and came up and looked at it, and there was a new medical center across from the hospital, and started my own business, and was broke in about 90 days, and started working at the hospital on weekends and nights. And
what'd you do at the hospital?
I was a pharmacist for them. No computers back in those days. You did everything by hand. You made 100 labels a day for the IV bags. And since I had been in a military hospital before, I was used to hospital pharmacy. And what I had in the DMZ in Korea was pretty basic. You operated out of a tent, and you were there a couple of days, and then you went to another location. And this was, I learned a lot. And
so you wound up owning 2 pharmacies in Lakeport.
Yeah, in 1995, I opened the second one in the Bruno's grocery store location. In the store itself, it was a very small pharmacy, and I was able to give Bill Bernetti, who owned the pharmacy, all the over-the-counter products, so he could profit from selling cough syrups and those kind of things, and I was just strictly pharmacy. And then Don Duker and Bill Bernetti sold that pharmacy, or that grocery store, to C&K Marketing, the volume started going down, and my prescription business started going down. So I started taking on nursing homes and the jail and doing those kind of things, and then decided it was be best if I got outside of there, because the traffic was no longer an incentive for them to come by my pharmacy, and opened that second pharmacy the second time in December or January of 2010.
That's the one that's next to Bruno's now, huh?
Right, and
Yeah.
it was it was quite a much larger store than the other one, and we had medical supplies, and we really thought we would close the store, the one up by the hospital, and instead they both are in existence today, and we just retired in June and sold them to an independent couple. That one of them grew up here and worked for me before she went into the military, and Kyla Holmes and her husband Danny, and I took quite a bit of money less, a few million less, to keep it local, so we wouldn't have CVS had offered to buy me and at about $3 million more, and I wouldn't sell to a chain. They were just going to take the medication and records and move it to their current location and close both pharmacies and leave them empty. So that wasn't what I worked all my years of life for. It was to take care of the community, and I chose to make that the priority rather than make a huge amount of money on selling it. So now I'm retired and not doing well at being retired. I need a goal, and I've been very involved in the community with being the president of the Chamber of Commerce a couple of times, and being on the hospital board and the president of that board for a few years, and being involved in all the pharmaceutical associations, and I'm in a national appointee for a independent pharmacy group, and when I had the stores, and I would travel all over the United States for to be on that board. And recently, I'd forgotten about this because it was in the early part, but I was appointed by the governor of California to be the on the advisory board at the Napa State Hospital. So,
Which governor was that?
I think it was Duke Magian.
That was a while ago.
Oh yeah,
Quite a
it
while
was.
ago,
It was. Yeah.
So you're no stranger to radio. You have a weekly radio show on KXBX?
Yes, I do every Wednesday from 10 to 11, and I've done that for over 30 years. And I used to do TV when they had Lake County TV here. They would come in the pharmacy down at Bruno's. And
So what do you do on your KXBX show?
it's called Health Talk. I take current things that are going on in the healthcare field. Recently, the opioid crisis. Now, there's just new things all the time. There's a new directive on taking baby aspirin, and there's an over-prescribing of antibiotics, and there's a terrible flu epidemic going on. There's no shortage of information, but I try to talk to people like
So
they
you do
can
that,
understand.
You do that once a week?
Yeah, every
And it's
every
a
Wednesday.
1-hour show?
1 hour show.
You get paid to do that?
Mm-mm.
No? You're like us? You're a volunteer like us?
Yeah, I always, in fact, I paid to do it for when I had the pharmacies because I was advertising the pharmacies. But
okay. Kind of a trade-off. They didn't pay you, but you got some free advertising.
Well, no, I paid for the advertising. That was the charge, and then they wanted to take me to a higher broadcast area to bring to cover more radio stations, and I said I wouldn't do it without being paid because it wouldn't bring any more people into Lakeport. And
so you're still doing the show?
Yeah, still doing it.
You're going to keep doing it during your campaign?
Yeah, I don't. We're not allowed to talk about the campaign or me even running on the radio. So unless I want to, put an ad in there and pay for it. So that may be determined.
Do you have a campaign manager?
Yeah, locally I have a Bill Brunetti and a group, Bobby Dutcher and Jennifer Strong and Jim Filippi, who's a computer guy, and Tom Lincoln. They're all on my selection committee to start with. Bill is the real campaign manager, and then I have a consultant out of Sacramento.
Who's the consultant?
Chris Jones, and worked with Lake County for many different campaigns.
Yeah, he's the guy that put out all that misleading literature during our cannabis wars a few years ago. Huh?
I don't know that. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Do you have a campaign treasurer?
Bill, he's doing both.
Bill Brunetti?
Yeah, and he's
the guy who used to own Bruno's, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he.
Do you have a website?
We do, and I've it was just going public last weekend, and I'm having trouble bringing it up, and it was www. Bill Kearney for Supervisor 2020, and I can bring it up with a. I tried to get a hold of Chris, but he was out of town. I can bring it up with a password, but it only works for me. And
yeah, I tried to locate it and I couldn't locate it. But once it's up and running, it's say it again. It's www. What?
www. Bill Kearney for Supervisor 2020.
Okay, and Kearney spelled how for those that don't know?
Kearney.
Okay. Do you have a Facebook page for your campaign?
We're just finishing it this weekend. So.
Okay. Do you have a phone number you want to give out in case people want to get a hold of you?
Sure. My cell is 707 489 1654. That's 707 489 1654.
Okay. Email you want to give out?
B. Kearney, Kearney, 10 at mchsi.com.
Okay. I want to ask you about something that's in the news right now. How do you feel about the impeachment of President Trump?
I don't like it. I don't like what's going on in the country. I see neither party getting anything accomplished.
Are you a Trump supporter?
I was in the beginning, and I'm certainly, there isn't anybody in the other party that I have any faith in. I think it's just become a war between the two parties, and I'm not proud of either side. I think Trump has accomplished some things, but he's also he's had a problem with his Twitter and his mouth, and he probably always will have, because he's not a politician.
Yeah.
You know, he's a businessman.
Why are you running for supervisor?
Well, the number one reason is excuse me, I've always been involved in the county in one way or the other in different organizations, and I was public enough that my views, I was on environmental meetings I was in with bringing more business to Lake County, and then I got discouraged because when we brought more business into Lake County, there was no support. I never had any support from the County of Lake in the very beginning I did the jail and the medications for the jail, and I've worked with previous administrators, and never as soon as my competition came in, and we do probably 90% of CVS's medications now, because they had lost their license to do controlled substances, and Kmart went out of business in the pharmacy a couple of years ago, and Thrifty was here, and we survived them, and Long's, and we've been there 39 years. All those people are gone now, except CVS. Safeway, has prescriptions, but they're not much of a threat.
So what's your budget for your campaign?
$35,000.
Is that through the primary in March, or are you talking about through November?
Well, we haven't planned. That was through November, but we haven't planned for. Right now, we're just hoping to get through the primary. I've got competitors that have been out there much longer than I have.
Yeah, how much have you raised so far?
We're just now starting the financial thing, so we have about 10 grand in there, I think.
Who are your major contributors?
I had a whole list of them. Of course, major is Bill and I put the money into the very beginning to get the account going, because you have to go through the Secretary of State and set something else up. A fellow over in that owns Lake County Waste, Bruce McCracken, gave me $1,000, and some people that can't even vote for me, and he can't vote for me either. Most of the people that can't vote for me are the major contributors so far. The people at Boutique Winery, Alan and his wife that have the place out on the point, and the old Baker place. He was a major contributor. I haven't received all the checks. I've got Bill is there to be sent to him, and he photostats them and gives them to me to put in my file. So
right.
We're just really starting.
So who referred you to your campaign consultant, Jones?
Rob Brown.
Okay. Is he supporting you?
He, I understand that this is just politics, but it's hard for me to understand why, if he wanted me to be in there, that he didn't support me. He supported somebody else, and since I'm getting into it so late, there were a lot of people that thought that there was nobody else running and signed for Jessica. So, and me not being a politician normally, I'm just kind of learning the ropes. And
yeah.
I
you
know
saying Rob Brown is not endorsing you?
At this point, he'd already endorsed her, thinking I wasn't
Jessica
running.
Peisker? Okay. What do you see as the major issues in the campaign?
Well, for me, the marijuana issue is going to be a huge thing, because
you've always been very anti-cannabis.
Well, I have to be. Yeah, I mean, I had to be, because it's a Schedule I drug, and I'm a pharmacist. You can't, you can't be on both sides of the law and run a pharmacy. It's legal in California, but federally it isn't. And
yeah, because we used to go to supervisor hearings, and you would testify for the anti-cannabis crowd, and I would testify for the pro-cannabis crowd. Are you still taking that same position? Because you mentioned that as the major issue. What do you mean it's the major issue?
Well, attempts to make it legal here have failed. And the main reason it's failed, it's too costly. And these are people that would qualify a year ago to be a legal grower, and they can't make it. They can't make it financially. You're painting a pretty gray picture of me, but I have a lot to learn. I'm still a pharmacist, but I'm not a practicing pharmacist. I still think marijuana has some bad parts of it, and if you watch the health things this week, now they're finding that chronic marijuana users are getting heart trouble now. I can give you the same effects of alcohol, and it's legal. And
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen those reports about cannabis. So, when you said it's a major issue, in what way? Do you want to make it easier for people to get in the cannabis industry in this county? Do you want to make it harder? Do you want to eliminate the cannabis industry in this county? What's your position? You mentioned that, so what's your position?
Well, for example, I don't think that you will ever end that. That's just part of the times. California is a very progressive state when it comes to opportunities like this. They'll tax you till you can't afford to do it if they just keep up, and that's your party that's doing it. So the taxes just got so much that the people that were doing the right way to grow is not being able to afford to do it. And so they're going on the other side. Now, The sheriff's department doesn't have enough people to. Still have to talk to Brian, but they don't have enough people to.
So what's your
police
solution?
it.
What's your proposal? What's your solution?
Well, it isn't just a solution. It's working. Education is and I'm the guy that's learning. I'm going out to look at some grows next week, and Bobby Dutcher, who you know, is taking me to good grows and bad grows to show me the difference. And I'm not, I'm not a person that thinks that you ought to experiment on other people with things that you don't know, and that's what's happening with marijuana. That's what's happening with opiates. They're lacing it with other things. That meeting that you saw me speak against, I was threatened by the cartel that night, anonymously, and I don't know who it was, with a phone call, and they told me that if I stood up, if you remember, they asked me why I was the only Jeff Smith said, "Why are you the only businessman here?" And I said, because my life was threatened, and nobody else has the ambition or the desire to die. And I said, I do. I mean, that's how bad I thought about this. And at the time there was, they even had the union in there, and everybody talking about it. So, and I told my wife if I didn't get back to the car and call her by 8:30, that they had probably got me. Was it important enough for me to? Yes, it was. I can't do anything about it being legalized. I'm not the guy. I have an interesting question to the major growers. If this wasn't if this wasn't profitable, would you still have the desire to do what you're doing? Mm-hmm. And most of the growers would say no. Mm-hmm. And that isn't believing in the product to me. I think that marijuana has some good points to it. I think 90% of it isn't sold for that purpose, and that's mm-hmm. what I said that night.
Well, I'm sorry you had somebody threaten you. I'd never heard that story. That's outrageous. So, who do you? Let me move on now. Who do you see as your main opponent in this election?
Well, right now, the one that really stands out is Jessica.
Jessica Pyska.
Pyska.
Why should people vote for you instead of her?
I've lived in this area for 40 years. I've been a business person in this community for 40 years. I've been in organizations that deal with survival, and I have a farmer's background to start with in an agriculture community, and I'm meeting with the Farm Bureau next week, and I've been experienced with law enforcement as far as working with them, with the public, and I just think that if you've been in business, that's a tremendous asset for to sit on a committee with 4 other people that have varied interests too. I'm not running it to get wealthy, which has been the pattern in some of the situations when people run for the Board of Supervisors, and I don't really need the money, but I care about this community, and I think and I'm not afraid, as you know, of speaking how I feel. That's I was told to be really mellow on this radio show, and
who told you that?
I'm not going to tell you, but somebody that knows you very well, and so I said, I'll do the best I can, but I'm going to be me, and I don't dislike anybody that's involved in marijuana. Bobby's one of my best friends. We go fishing together all the time, and
Bobby Dutcher you're talking about. He's been very pro cannabis for many years. So well let me move on. In a press release you sent out, you said, and I quote, "For nearly 40 years, I've helped Lake County seniors and families to get affordable medications," unquote. Could you explain that statement, what that means, what you meant by that?
Well, that was written by my consultant, actually, but what What it means is that there were many times that nobody else was on call. No other pharmacy was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I was for 20 years. I had 3 nursing homes that needed somebody to be on call that I just took care of the medications for. I had the jail that I was on call for 24 hours. In the state, I got a law passed to increase the amount of medication that was in those emergency boxes.
Okay, but you didn't sell your medications any cheaper than, say, CVS or Safeway or other pharmacies. Huh?
Well, you have to remember, I worked for Walgreens for 15 years. I didn't just fall off a turnip truck when it came to running a pharmacy. I knew how to be competitive.
Right.
So, and I took every insurance that nobody wanted to, and sometimes waited as long as 6 months to get my return. In our business, it was a little different back then, but 95% of your business isn't cash. It's some sort of an insurance plan.
Okay.
And if you knew how much we were making on prescriptions right now, you wouldn't believe it. It's pennies.
Okay, thank you. This is Ron Green. This is the Philadelphia Lawyer Show. We're in the studio with Bill Kearney, who's running for supervisor in District 5. So in your press release, which was just published in the Record B, I don't know if it was published in the Lake County News, but I saw it in the Record B, you said Lake County is facing serious challenges such as a lack of local jobs, unacceptable power outages, and financial hardships. I want to bring a citizen's voice with experience to the Board of Supervisors and provide problem-solving leadership that will help us successfully overcome these challenges. And in a similar vein, in your press release, you said Lake County just can't afford business as usual any longer. We must preserve our small town quality of life while finding new ways to attract jobs and revenue-generating businesses to our local communities. My question is this: do you have any specific ideas on how to preserve our small town quality of life while finding new ways to attract jobs and revenue-generating businesses?
Well, I don't know for sure, Ron, but I think one thing that I don't think we have anybody out there aggressively looking for somebody to fill the holes. You just look out your window here and see nothing but empty shops about every other place. You go into a town like Kelseyville, and there's hardly any empty shops. What's the difference here? Does it have to be? Is it millennials that don't want to do anything? Is it press from outside the county? If you look at the Microsoft News and you ask for the poorest county in the state of California, it's Lake County. Why? If you look for the worst for health, you'll find Lake County in the bottom 2. If you ask for, I was just at a Board of Supervisors meeting on Tuesday. What's the worst county in the state of California for vaping? Lake County.
For what?
Vaping.
Vaping.
And now they're putting marijuana, of course, in vaping pipes or vaping cigarettes, and people are getting addicted to nicotine and the vitamin E that's in there that's causing the lungs to collapse and pulmonary disease.
Okay, well, my question was whether you had any specific ideas on how to preserve our small town quality of life while finding ways to attract jobs and revenue-generating businesses. So I think you're a little off there on the topic. Do you have any plan? Do you have a plan to create more local jobs?
Well, the question that I was asked was more county jobs, and I wasn't aware that there was an issue with county jobs. The only way you can increase people working here is to have a different kind of a population that wants to do this. Instead of opening a store and saying that I'm going to be here, and this is the way it was when I first came to Lake County. There would be a thing on the window saying, gone fishing, gone on vacation. They're not open. Well, you can't attract somebody like that. You can't go to them. I would like to see more technology. I would like to see, they're working on broadband. I'm involved in that. They're working on having a high-speed internet with the AT&T, and those are the kind of things that I mean. I know people that live in Nice and Lucerne that work out of Las Vegas, and there is something that has to be done so they can become available. We have homes now that we're going to have to pay a lot more money for because of insurance from the fires. But I think we have to recruit that way. I think Bill Bernetti has been a great person to bring people into this county, but we don't have people, and I don't know if it's a marketing ploy, if it's a grant money, but there has to be a way to do it. And when we first came here, we actually, a group of us, changed the whole character of the Board of Supervisors because it was pretty much a no-growth thing. Mm-hmm. And we brought more people in here, and people were interested to come here.
Okay, so you mentioned in your press release power outages. Do you have a plan to overcome the challenge of power outages? Do you have any ideas on that?
Well, PG&E has become very active in trying to have preventative things going, but somehow somebody else has to control PG&E, or at least, you can do everything you want to cut the trees down, but the equipment you have back there, those old transformers and things, need to be changed. And you can cut all the trees you want, but if that transformer, and I think, again, I haven't been involved in that, but that's my primary reason. Actually, the fire thing is my big reason that I think that I'm interested in this, because people are leaving. I went to a meeting a month ago, a ladies' meeting, and I do that public speaking about healthcare. 8 of the women there were moving away, and they were all moving to Texas, and they weren't related. They were all moving to different parts because they didn't want to live here. I had my cousin called me from Washington, D.C., and he said he didn't know if you still lived there because of all the fires.
Well, any ideas on promoting wildfire safety?
Well, I do have, as far as, and this is part of my, probably as important as the marijuana thing, is education. And we've been having meetings with, I'm on the Homeowners Association where I live, and although one of my proponents has said I'm in a privileged group because I live in Buckingham, I rented a house out there. I didn't. Eventually, I was successful enough to buy the house that I rented, but we have been going to meetings in the 3 different Rivieras and Buckingham, and have formed a coalition of people to monitor how these things are going, and if we see places that haven't been cleaned up, letting CAL FIRE know and letting the county know. We have BLM property right next to Buckingham that is a mess, and nobody can do anything about it but the federal government. So we've got Mike Thompson involved to help us there.
Okay. And any truth to the rumors that despite a March 3rd election that you're taking January off for an extended vacation? I keep hearing this.
Well, wasn't a nice thing to bring up, but when I sold the pharmacy, we had our reward was to go to Maria for a month because we'd been there 39 years.
To go where?
Maria. It's it's a French Polynesian island.
Okay. And you're going in January?
Yes.
The whole month?
Yes.
Okay. Well, what do you say to people that think taking a long vacation at that particular time means you're not really a serious candidate, or you don't really care whether you get elected? I mean, that's pretty unusual to take a month off in the middle of.
Did you hear what I did? I got this was paid for a year ago, Ron. I didn't know I was running for election. I was asked to come in to do it. I knew my time was short. I knew I had competitors. That doesn't cut my desire to do this.
Okay.
It may be an impossible task. I don't know.
Yeah. Who asked you to run?
There was a group of people, not just an individual.
People you've already mentioned?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm glad in a sense they did, because I'm really having a difficult time being retired. Do I care if I win or not? Well, it's not going to, it's not going to ruin my retirement, because I'll do something else. But
Yeah.
I thought this was a perfect way to stay involved in this community that I've spent the majority of my business life here, and don't ever plan on leaving. And why not offer what you have?
Yeah. What's your position on the growing of hemp as opposed to licensed cannabis?
Well, I'm kind of mixed on that, because the CBD oil and everything that's not regulated by anybody, and never will be, gets. And am I right to say that that's involved in, that hemp is involved in the growing, in the making of CBD?
Yes, they'll grow hemp for,
Yeah.
well, they can grow it for clothes,
Right.
textiles,
Oh, yeah, I know that. Yeah.
CBD, or the seed.
But it will
Yeah.
never be. It will never be licensed, because you'll never be, because it's a natural product. So back in 1994, there was a law passed that says any natural product doesn't have to put on a label what the strength is, what the purity is, what anything is, and that's
Well, if
why.
that's true, that should be changed, certainly.
Well, it won't be, because it's the Food and Drug
Yeah.
Administration, and that's a law that's been around since '94, and that's why when you buy, I mean, for their pharmacies that sell CBD oil, I wouldn't, because I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
There's,
Do you see any problems with the interplay of the heavily regulated state licensed cannabis industry and the loosely regulated hemp growers? You see any problems with that?
well, I don't, and I'm just educating myself about that. Bobby Dutcher, I'm meeting with him on Monday for a half a day, and he's kind of discouraged about their ability to be loosely regulated compared to the cannabis industry. But I don't know, because I've never been around a hemp growing area. I will be next week, because I have to learn too. I mean, you're asking me questions about things that I've always stayed away from, and part of me running for this position is not to be negative, but at least be open and see the value.
Yeah.
Just
Okay. What ideas do you have on solving the county budget shortfalls that we've been having here in Lake County?
well, what I don't like happening is if the county can't run right, that we have to tax more. I mean, I just looked at my homeowners, or my assessment for my home. I had 4 things on there for fire, and the highest one was $200. Of course, my fire insurance has risen. If I had happened to want to buy a home now, it would be about, in the area that we live in, it'd be probably $20,000 higher because of fire insurance. So, I
was asking you about the county budget shortfalls, and if you
Well-
have any suggestions on how to deal with the fact that the county doesn't have enough money.
Well, and I told you that they're trying to get the money by extra taxes, but how are you going to get money if you don't have any businesses here? I mean, we just lost all the TOT funds from Kmart. I would like to see an aggressive recruiting plan to get some people in here. I'm not afraid of chains. I'm not afraid of bringing, if they bring funds in. If you're a good businessman and you're an independent businessman, you're still going to survive, and you're going to do very well. I'm a good picture of what you can do if you really care about your business and care about the community. So I would like to get high-tech things in here. I'd like to get some, this is a perfect area. It's beautiful. You live on the lake or close to the lake and visualize the lake, and recruit some of those people up here, and maybe have somebody like Google have a place up here. It would be perfect.
You think that's realistic?
I do. I hear people talking about it already, and we just have to have the right people recruiting. We have I've got a good friend that works for Google, flies his airplane down and works there 3 or 4 days a week and flies back and has an apartment down there. And he's young. He would certainly like to see some, and he's way smarter than you or I. Well, I don't know about you, but I do know that I'm not at the top of the scale. But
Okay, what solutions do you propose to alleviate the plight of the county's homeless population?
well, that's one of my issues, and when you don't have enough capital to take care of all your maintenance, then you have to do other things, and I don't know how bad the homeless situation is here. I just went to a business the other day, and the owner said I opened the door, and he said right laying against my door was a homeless person, and he said you're going to have to leave. He said it was out of the rain, and he said, nah, but you can't stay here in front of my door. He said you can come back tonight after I close, and he'd buy him a sandwich. I don't think you have to build shelters as elaborate as I see down in Oakland, and I forget, they have a name for those development centers or something. But I think we have to do something, and my fear is that we will attract more people up here that weren't just Lake County homeless. They'll want to come someplace else because somebody cares. We have people that, the warming center, for example, they can stay there at night and they have to leave during the day. We help out with that, and it's effective. But how many people? I think the Adventist Church last year had a place for them. So I just think we have to have somebody that has that as a cause. We can all sit here and realize that it's not that big of an issue, but it will be an issue. And how are we going to handle it? Instead of being just following up on something that becomes a problem, identify the problem ahead of time and do it. And I'm, you have all these ideas and you're asking me all these questions about what I would do, but I never really thought homeless was a problem until a couple of years ago, and I'm a vet. I know what it's like to come back and be called baby killer and be treated like dirt. And I never had anybody. I got out of the Army in '69, and nobody until I was standing out in front of Bruno's buying a poppy said thank you for your service. It was the worst experience was coming home.
Well, those were tough times. There was an unpopular war.
I understand that, but it doesn't make you feel any better inside.
No, I understand that. And I was in the Navy at the same time period, a little later than you. So I'll say thank you for your service.
Well, thanks, Ron. I appreciate that.
You must have heard that some the last couple of decades, but back in the 70s, it was a lot of people were angry about Vietnam and anybody that was there.
I mean, I had roommates in Chicago that I went back to when and I had to leave. They were that angry about me. I was drafted. Not much I could have done, but.
Well, a couple more questions here because we're running out of time. We have to play a little music on the way out so that the next show can set up. What's your position on Dollar General's attempts to open multiple stores in Lake County?
I'm against it.
Because?
Because it isn't necessarily cheaper. You can go to the dollar store and get really things for $1. They're competing. They're eventually going to take the big grocery stores out of business, and it's happening. I just don't. I was pretty angry when the dollar store went in here because I knew nothing about it. I'm pretty involved in the community. I don't know how it got.
You mean the one in Lakeport?
Yeah, I don't know how it got through. And then they wanted one in Middletown, and they want one in Upper Lake, and they want one, on every corner. I forget how many they're doing a week, but it's
right. Well, I certainly agree with you on Dollar General. It's just. Anyway, we are running short of time here. We're not going to be able to take any calls today. I apologize to the listeners out there. Any ideas on combating the cyanobacteria problem in Clear Lake?
I don't think so. It's a healthy lake. a very healthy lake. I don't know why we ever named it Clear Lake, but
Well, apparently it used to be clearer,
yeah.
maybe.
But
Any ideas on combating the threat of quagga and zebra mussels?
well, I I don't know how effective we are, but I live out by Buckingham, and they're very proactive in making sure that people get the stickers, even if they're. We thought at the time, I was the guy that started bass tournaments up here back in the early '90s. I paid for a couple on my own, and then we started getting bigger and bigger. And I just looked at the lake and said, why is it dead from, so then we had the quagga mussel thing, and I'm not sure if these are volunteers, but or they're getting paid anything, but I see somebody here on 5th Street and right here by the hotel or the courthouse all the time checking boats, and I've seen the sheriffs do that too. The fishermen, the bass fishermen, don't like it because they, if you keep your boat here, you just have to get one and
Okay.
every year. But
Well, we are going to have to wrap this up. Do you want to give out any contact information once again, phone number or email?
sure, this is Bill Kearney, and I'm running for supervisor for District Number 5. My contact information on my cell phone is 707-489-1654. That's 707-489-1654. And my email address is B as in boy, Kearney, Kearney, 10 at mchsi.com.
Okay, we do have to wrap it. This is KPFZ 88.1 FM in Lakeport, California, listener-supported community radio. This is Ron Green.